She heard her fiancé call her convenient through a kitchen wall, and instead of crying, she picked up a serving spoon and smiled. That single choice, made in less than 4 seconds, would end up costing him his promotion, his relationship with another woman, and the reputation he'd spent a decade building. He had no idea any of that was coming. He thought he was safe. He thought she was too tired, too invested, too far past 38 to ever walk away. He was wrong about all of it. And by the time he understood exactly how wrong, it was already far too late to fix. Let me tell you how it started. I bought the dress 4 months before that night. Deep emerald, fitted through the waist, the kind of dress you save for something that matters. Marcus had seen me in something similar once and said it made me look surprisingly put together for your age. I'd laughed it off then. I filed it away as a compliment instead of what it actually was, a warning I didn't want to read. That night, standing in his kitchen with the roast still resting and the wine already breathing, I put that dress on like it meant something. That's the kind of woman I was back then. A woman who turned insults into compliments because believing the insult would have cost too much. My name is Renata Ashford. I was 38 years old, and I directed compliance operations for a regional banking network spanning 11 branches and just over 300 employees. I caught the errors nobody else wanted to find. I fixed problems quietly before they became headlines. I was good at my job in the exact way that looks effortless from the outside and is actually a constant, humming calculation underneath. I brought all of that calculation home with me. Every bit of it. I'd been with Marcus Whitfield, my fiancé, a commercial insurance broker, for 5 years. Long enough to know his coffee order, his mother's anniversary, the specific way his shoulders tightened when a deal fell through. I knew which colleagues made him generous and which ones made him perform. That's what 5 years of paying attention looks like. He knew I liked my wine dry. That was about the extent of what he knew about me. And for a long time, I told myself that was enough. The house smelled like rosemary and butter and the good Cabernet I'd chosen specifically because I wanted the evening to feel like a celebration. I'd left work 2 hours early, changed in the guest bathroom so I could surprise him when he walked in, touched up my makeup without anyone asking me to. 3 of Marcus's closest colleagues were coming that evening. A small, informal dinner to celebrate our engagement, 6 weeks in, wedding 8 months out. The joint account I'd been feeding faithfully every paycheck sat at just over $17,000. I believed in us completely. That part still costs me something to admit out loud. I had turned down a regional VP position in Charlotte the same month Marcus proposed. The kind of role that comes once in a career like mine. I told myself it was love. Looking back, I think part of it was fear. Fear of what 39 looks like when you're doing it alone, when you're the woman who chose her career and lost the relationship and has to explain that at every holiday until somebody mercifully changes the subject. My grandmother used to say, "Renata, you hand people your whole hand before they've even asked for a finger." I heard that in her kitchen 100 Sunday mornings, and I thought she was old-fashioned. I thought generosity was what love was supposed to look like. I'm not so sure anymore. Marcus came home early that evening, already loose from a drink somewhere, laughing at something on his phone before he'd even cleared the doorway. He kissed my cheek, said dinner smelled good, and walked straight to the living room without asking how my day had gone. I noticed. I always noticed. I kept plating anyway. His colleague Dominic arrived 20 minutes later, loud in that way that fills a room without adding anything to it. One of the other guests had canceled last minute, so it was just the 3 of us, and I was finishing the last dish in the kitchen while they settled in with their drinks. The wall between the kitchen and the living room was thin. I'd always loved that about the house. You could hear everything from that kitchen. I used to think it made the place feel alive. Marcus's laugh drifted through first. Then Dominic's voice, lower. "You sure about all this, man? You seem like you've still got 1 foot out the door." The pause. Then Marcus said my name, and everything after it landed like separate stones dropped into still water. He called me convenient. He said I was smart enough to know I wasn't getting a better offer at my age, and that's why I was easy to keep around. He made a joke about the dress, about what it was doing for me and what it wouldn't be doing much longer. Dominic laughed. Not politely. Fully. My jaw locked. I set the serving spoon down on the counter. I straightened my dress. I picked up the platter, walked out with a smile already arranged on my face, and set the food on the table. When Marcus raised his glass and said, "To us, to the future," I raised mine too. I smiled at him like I hadn't heard a single word. Dominic left around 10. Big goodbye, too much laughing. A hand clapped on Marcus's shoulder at the door. I stood behind Marcus and told him it was good to see him. He looked at me once, just once, and something crossed his face I couldn't name that night. I can name it now. It was guilt. The cheap kind. The kind that shows up far too late to matter. Marcus rinsed his glass and stretched like a man with absolutely nothing on his conscience. "I'm beat," he said. "You coming up?" "In a bit. Let me finish the kitchen." He kissed my temple and disappeared down the hall. I stood at the sink and turned on the water. I washed every dish, wiped every counter, put the leftovers away exactly the way he liked them, labeled, organized. I did all of it with my hands and none of it with my mind, because my mind was somewhere else entirely, running the same 40 seconds on a loop. Not hysterically. Precisely. The way I review a flag transaction. Once for the shock. Once for the facts. Convenient. Smart enough to know she won't get a better offer. That's why she's easy to keep. The facts didn't soften on the second pass. They only got clearer. "Night, Renata," Marcus called from down the hall. "I'll be up shortly," I said. My voice was steady. That surprised me. Then it didn't. I waited until I heard his breathing shift into that slow, even rhythm. I knew the way you know the sounds of a house you've lived in long enough. I gave it 15 minutes. Then I picked up my phone, walked out to the back porch and sat in the dark. I called my sister, Camille, a corporate litigator who had spent 20 years reading contracts people hadn't bothered to read themselves. She picked up on the second ring. "It's late," she said. "I know." She waited. That was the thing about Camille. She never pushed. She let you walk through the door at your own pace. I told her everything, start to finish. No editorializing. Just what I'd heard through that wall and what I'd done with it afterward, the toast, the smile I'd held for 2.5 hours. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a short silence, and then she asked 2 questions. "Is your name on the deed to that house?" My hands went still. "He said we'd do it after the wedding." "And the joint account? Do you have full, independent access? Statements, everything?" Thought I did. Sitting there in the dark, I realized I hadn't actually pulled those statements myself in months. Marcus managed the account. He was the insurance man, the numbers guy. I trusted the structure because I trusted the person who built it. "I'm going to find out," I said. "Before you do anything else," Camille said, "find out. There's a specific kind of hurt that sits in your chest like a stone. And then there's what happens when that stone goes cold. Cold is different. Cold is useful." What I felt on that porch wasn't grief anymore. It was the particular clarity that arrives the moment you stop hoping you're wrong. I went back inside, moved through the dark house without turning on a single light, and slid into bed beside Marcus. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling while he slept like a man who had never once considered he might owe anyone an explanation. He thinks I'm too invested to leave. Let him keep thinking that. Marcus was out by 7 the next morning, a breakfast meeting he'd mentioned the night before without me retaining a single word of it. I came downstairs in my robe, put the kettle on, and there it was. His laptop, open on the counter, screen still lit from whatever he'd been reviewing before he left. I wasn't looking for anything. I want to be clear about that. But the calendar was open, right there in the week's view, and I saw it. A recurring Thursday lunch, 3 months of consecutive entries, blocked off at noon every single week. One name. Sabine. I took a photo without touching the keyboard. That mattered to me, not touching it. I leaned in close enough to read it clearly, captured the image, and straightened up. Then I poured my tea and left for work. You know what nobody tells you about the moment your life starts cracking? You still have to show up for all of it. I ran 2 department reviews that day, approved a compliance exception, and resolved a vendor dispute that had been sitting on my desk for a week, because I simply didn't have the patience for anything that required more than the information already in front of me. That evening, I sat down at my own laptop, not his, mine, and logged into the joint account. My hands went still. The balance was wrong. Not off by a little. Wrong by a number with a comma in it. I pulled the transaction history back 4 months. The transfers were there, neat and regular as rent. Different amounts, consistent timing, always the first week of the month, always to the same destination. An account under a business name I'd never heard of. Nothing that matched a single expense we'd ever discussed. I read it twice. Then I screenshotted every transaction and emailed them to myself under a subject line that said only documentation. Then I pulled the lease from my old apartment, the one I'd given up 16 months earlier when I moved into Marcus's house because it was the practical thing to do, because we were building something together, because the deed was supposed to be handled before the wedding. I searched every folder I owned, digital and paper. My name did not appear on a single document connected to that house. Not the deed. Not the mortgage. Nothing. 16 months of my life, my furniture, my rent money folded into his household, and on paper, I was a guest. I called Camille and read her the numbers straight off the screen. She was quiet for a moment. That money didn't disappear, Renata. It went somewhere specific. We need to find out where. I know. But don't move anything. Don't say anything. Just document. Already started, I said. I didn't confront Marcus at dinner. He talked about his upcoming partner review, how a senior executive had mentioned him specifically in a leadership conversation, how visibility mattered over the next month. I asked polite questions and refilled his glass. My grandmother used to say you could learn everything about a man from what he assumed you'd never notice. I was decades behind on that lesson. I was catching up fast. That night, after he went upstairs, I opened a fresh notebook and started writing every deposit I'd ever made into that account, every date, every amount, cross-referenced against records I'd already emailed myself. It took 2 hours. When I finished, I had 9 pages in my own handwriting that left no room for argument. Then I thought about that business account name, the one I didn't recognize, and started wondering exactly what we'd find at the other end of it. Thursday came the way difficult things usually do, ordinary, unremarkable. I took a half day. I parked across from a bistro Marcus had mentioned twice, once as a client lunch spot, once in passing about a colleague's birthday. I'd filed it away without meaning to. Always do. At 12:04, Marcus's car pulled into the lot. At 12:06, a woman rounded the corner, younger, moving with the kind of ease that hasn't yet learned to brace for anything. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile you can't perform. He touched the small of her back as they walked in. I knew that gesture down to the pressure of it. They were inside for 41 minutes. I took one clear photo when they came out, still close, unhurried, the conversation clearly not finished. Then I drove back to work and finished my afternoon like nothing had happened, because right now, feelings were a currency I couldn't afford to spend. That evening, 10 minutes on the firm's staff directory confirmed what the photo already told me. Her name was Sabine, 28, a client relations associate, meaning she and Marcus had entirely legitimate-sounding reasons to be seen together constantly. Her professional activity spanned exactly 3 months. The dates lined up precisely with the calendar entries. I emailed it all to myself. Then I called Camille. Now we know the what, she said. We still need the money. The following week, she called me back with an answer. I found it. The account receiving those transfers belongs to an LLC registered about 5 months ago. No website, no activity, nothing that looks like real business. The pause. You want to know the registered agent? I already knew before she said it. Something in my chest had rearranged itself around the answer. Sabine, Camille said. Her name, her signature, filed with the state. I set my coffee down. 5 months ago. Marcus had proposed to me 9 months earlier. 5 months after that proposal, he opened a business account with the woman he'd introduced to me once, in passing as someone from the office. I drew a line in my notebook between the 2 dates. 68 days apart. You know what that tells you about a man? He was never fully in it with both hands. He was hedging, calculating, deciding where each piece needed to go while I kept feeding an account that was quietly funding someone else's future. 3 days later, my Aunt Delphine, my mother's older sister, the one person in my family who says a hard truth without apologizing for it first, told me something over tea that rearranged everything one more time. About 7 months before he proposed, she said, Marcus came to me privately. Said he wanted to know if there was anything left from your father's estate you might still be entitled to. Framed it like concern. I've been around long enough to know the difference between a man asking about a woman and a man asking about her money. She told him nothing. She told me nothing either, because she didn't want to break my heart on a feeling. Marcus had proposed because he believed there was money worth attaching himself to. When he found out there wasn't, leaving would have cost him standing. So instead, he kept me in place, steady, presentable, financially contributing, and opened a second door for Sabine. Desire in one hand, stability in the other. Me holding up the structure from underneath, unaware I was furniture. I wasn't the woman he chose. I was the frame he built around choosing someone else. That night I told Marcus I wanted to host a proper celebration dinner. His colleagues, a few family members, something that showed everyone how serious we were. He lit up immediately, flattered that I'd think of it. I told him I'd handle everything. The 2 weeks that followed were the most productive of my life. I booked his favorite restaurant, requested the private room, sent handwritten invitations. I confirmed his 2 senior colleagues, including the man overseeing his partner review, along with Dominic, Camille, and Aunt Delphine. I watched Marcus's face rearrange into pure satisfaction when I read him the guest list. 10 days before the dinner, Camille slid a demand letter across a coffee shop table. $9,400 in unauthorized transfers from our joint account into an LLC registered to the woman Marcus had been meeting every Thursday for 3 months. Hold it, I said. Don't send it yet. She didn't ask why. She knew by then that when I asked her to wait, I wasn't hesitating. I was sequencing. The night before the dinner, I packed what mattered into a car while Marcus was at work. Documents, my mother's jewelry box, a month of clothes. I left his house key on the counter and said nothing about it. The restaurant manager sat me at the head of the table before the first guest arrived. Delphine and Camille came in together and sat without a word, already knowing. Marcus's colleagues arrived. Then Dominic, scanning the room and catching something in the air he couldn't quite name. Marcus came last, already performing, shoulders back, easy smile, shaking hands before anyone had said anything funny. The first half of dinner was the most interesting performance I've ever watched. Charming, warm, entirely at ease. A man who had never once considered the room might not belong to him. Then he lifted his glass, thanked everyone, talked about our future, called me steady, generous, the kind of woman who makes a man better. I stood up. No ceremony to it. I've been doing some financial planning of my own, I said. Turns out I discovered a few things Marcus forgot to mention. I named the account. I named the transfer amounts, the dates, the LLC, the registration window that landed 68 days after our engagement. I looked at the senior executive holding Marcus's promotion in his hands and told him to be careful where his client's money went. I looked at Dominic and told him he already knew what kind of man Marcus was. I was just the last one in the room to find out. Then I took off my ring, set it flat on the table beside my plate, picked up my purse, and said 5 words. Don't call me. We're done. I walked out. The table stayed silent behind me. The promotion news came 9 days later, tabled indefinitely, the official language something bloodless about judgment concerns noted in the current review cycle. Nobody had to lie. I'd simply told the truth to the right people in the right room. Camille sent the demand letter on day 15. Marcus wired the full amount within 18 days. No response, no explanation. I looked at the confirmation over lunch at my desk, set my fork down, and thanked the version of myself who'd screenshotted every transaction instead of crying over them. I called Sabine once, 3 weeks later. Kept it short and kind. She hadn't done anything to me that Marcus hadn't engineered. I told her what the LLC had actually been funded with, what he'd said about me that night through the wall. I didn't ask her for anything. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Thank you for telling me." 2 weeks after that, I heard she'd ended it. Dominic texted 4 words on a Sunday evening. "I'm sorry," I laughed. I read it once and set the phone down. Some apologies arrive far too late to matter. He wasn't sorry that night when the laughing was easy and free. He was sorry now because now there was a cost attached. 6 weeks after the dinner, I stood in the empty living room of a furnished apartment I'd chosen myself, in a neighborhood I'd researched for 2 weeks, key in one hand, lease with my name, only my name, at the bottom. I thought about the serving spoon, the weight of it that night, how carefully I'd set it down, like the first move in a game he didn't know we were playing. She did all right, I thought. She did all right. 14 months later, in a city I chose for myself, by myself, I sit at my own table on Sunday mornings with coffee brewed strong, exactly how I like it, not the blend Marcus preferred that I bought for years without once asking why. I negotiated a director-level role at a new firm on my own terms, told no one until the contract was signed, and felt a specific kind of quiet I'd never known before. The best quiet there is, the kind that lives inside a decision nobody talked you into. Above my bed hangs a print I bought because it made something in my chest loosen, the first thing I ever purchased purely because it made me happy. Last month, I closed out the storage unit that held the last box from that life. Near the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, I found the serving spoon. I stood there a long moment, not thinking about Marcus at all, thinking instead about the woman who set it down so carefully in a kitchen that was never going to be hers, who straightened her dress, carried the food out, and smiled like her whole world wasn't quietly cracking beneath her feet. She knew something, that woman. She knew the moment hadn't arrived yet. So she waited. I brought the spoon home. I put it in my own kitchen drawer, in my own home, in a city that belongs entirely to me. It was enough. It was finally more than enough.